What would you pick now?
Please rise. The September 27th, 2023 meeting of Haliburton County Council is now in session. Warden Ms. Danielson presiding.
Please be seated. Good morning, everyone. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mishi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Mishi-Saugig and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda today? Councilors Ferry and Burton.
Moved by Councillor Ferry, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the September 27th, 2023 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Could I have I'm sorry, is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of September the 13th? Both the regular and special meetings. Councilors McKechnie and Shell.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that the minutes from the September 13th, 2023 regular and special meetings of Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no business arising from a previous meeting. No delegations today. So we'll move into finance. Morning, Andrea. So first is your check register.
Our August check register totaled $2,309,633.62.
Any questions on the check register? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councilors Carter and McKechnie.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that the Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the check register for August 2023. And further that the check register for August 2023 with checks, EFTs and PAPs totaling $2,309,633.62 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Next are the year-to-date actuals.
I think the payroll register first.
It's the payroll register
Oh, geez, first. Next is the payroll register. Sorry.
That's all right. We had 3 pay periods in August, which net direct deposits totaling $797,153.21.
Any questions on the payroll register? Hearing none, could I did I get a mover and a seconder? Councilors Ferry and Burton.
Moved by Councillor Ferry, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council acknowledges receipt of report COR-38-2023 regarding the payroll register for August 2023. And further that the payroll register for August 2023 with net direct deposits totaling $797,153.21 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Now are the year-to-date actuals.
Overall, as at August 31st, we're 59.29% of operating expenses have been incurred and 38.33% of capital expenses incurred. I have included in my report the details of any specific areas that are currently identifying over 67%, which is where we should be approximately by the end of August.
Any questions on the year-to-date actuals? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive them? Councilors Carter and Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the year-to-date actuals as at August 31st, 2023. And further that the year-to-date actuals as at August 31st, 2023 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, your debt policy.
Yes, this is a new policy being presented to council. Currently, the county does not have a debt policy, and we rely on our borrowing bylaw that we pass annually along with the ministry's annual repayment limit. Staff are recommending the attached policy, which will provide guidance and limits to be considered by council and staff when contemplating entering into debt. A few highlights to point out to council from the policy. The policy provides conditions that should be met in order for council to consider entering into debt, both for short and long term. We're also recommending within the policy that the annual repayment limit be set at 15% as opposed to the ministry's 25%. This conservative approach recognizes the fiscal limitations of our community. And also it's recommended within the policy that upon repayment of long-term debt, the amounts be committed, the amounts that are already committed within the budget for annual payments be reallocated to the capital program and or reserves until they've reached sustainability. And I'm happy to answer any questions council may have on that.
Questions or comments, Councillor Perry?
Well, first time I've seen this kind of a policy, and I thank you for bringing it forward. I think your conservative approach is a good approach, and I think we should adopt it. It's a checks and balances for council, and
I agree. That's something I was glad to see. Councillor Dayoud?
I appreciate most of the time we borrow from external organizations, but in some instances, I think we can borrow against our own reserves for important projects that were perhaps unforeseen. Is there any scope for borrowing against reserves in this policy, or would that not apply, or would it exist somewhere else? What would you recommend about that?
The policy does not speak to utilizing reserve monies. It is only for external agencies. When borrowing from reserves, that is the decision council can make it at any time when we're contemplating debt. And I think it is a good spot to start. And then when we are looking into the long-term repayment of our capital projects, not sure. Does that answer the question that it is always a good place to start looking at our own reserves and if we have the money to fund ourselves with the capital projects. If not, then this would be the next step.
Go ahead.
I suppose I'm going on our single experience in the last term at Algonquin-Highlands, where we decided to borrow against reserves for a project and then return that money to those reserves. So it isn't using the reserves, it's really a loan, an internal loan. Yeah,
And that the previous council did decide to do that when they purchased the We Care property. And it was a payment process back to the reserve, but things do change, and that then council then overturned that decision in the last budget process, and those payments weren't continued on. I guess I say that to say one council can make the decision to do that and make the repayment, but that doesn't mean it's going to follow right through to the end so that the reserve monies are back there.
So I guess it's a question more for council then as to whether we would want to develop a policy which protects loans against reserves in the future or no.
Well, personally, I mean, I think that this is an excellent start, and I don't know that we would borrow against reserves without having a fulsome conversation, and a lot of information provided to us in advance. I guess I would look to other members of council to see what their preference might be. I do think this is a great start, something we haven't had in the past. Comments, Councillor Fury?
Dyser does that all the time, and we pay ourselves back at bank rate. So the reserve's growing. So I think we'd have that discussion here. Certainly, if I was at the table, I wouldn't be in favor of taking it, just spending it and let it go. So I don't think you would either. I don't think any of us would. So I think we're safe on just going ahead with it.
Councillor Carter?
3 points. Number one, we in Minden borrow against reserves regularly. And as Dysart does, we pay ourselves, we pay the reserve back. So, because we end up, because of the way reserves work, sometimes we're just gathering an awful lot of dead money and so, using it for certain projects where you're going to borrow, like you're replacing the roof on the library or something like that, and it's going to be like a 5-year thing. Well, we often will borrow from reserves rather than trying to go out. The other 2 points are, number one, I mean, I think this is good policy. It's kind of a good reminder and good rules to live by council. Of course, any future council could always just change it and do what they want, but that's at least it's there. The one thing I would like to see changed, though, is that there you have in there that there's a limit of 40 years on the borrowing, and housing now with the CMHC has 50-year terms. And so, those, obviously the asset is going to will outlive the 50 years. But I think it may be that the only way that we can afford to build housing is to have a longer term. So obviously, anytime we borrow, we always try to have the shortest term possible. But sometimes that's not available to us. So I would either like to see that change to the 50 or to put housing in a special category.
That's what I was going to suggest, that we, as an additional item, if the loan is for housing, that it would be for a 50-year term. What's council's thoughts on that? That sounds agreeable. Yeah, Councillor Carter, I like that when you use the term, it's borrowing from reserves rather than using reserves.
Yep.
Which is important. I know that in Algonquin Highlands, we have used reserves from time to time, and
Right.
it really should be borrow from
Right.
and repay.
Right.
Any other comments or suggestions? I could have a mover and a seconder then to adopt the policy as amended. Councillors Fury and McKechnie.
So I have specified the amendment, if that's okay, in the resolution, but
Okay.
so moved by Councillor Fury, seconded by Councillor McKechnie, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the debt policy, and further that the debt policy be approved, incorporating an amendment allowing 50-year repayment on loans for housing.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Great work. Next up is information technology and GIS systems. Morning, Mr. March.
Morning, Warden Danielson, members of council. So my first of my 2 reports this month is my standard IT status report. As you probably saw the last meeting when I was unable to attend, unfortunately, I have changed the format of it. Hopefully that's all right. Just trying to get rid of some of maybe the stats that didn't really relate too much and kind of concentrate more on the meat, so to speak, in terms of the project status of what your IT team is working on. So I don't think I have anything that I wish to bring, that I need to bring to council's attention, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions on the IT status report.
Any questions on that report? Councillor Day?
Just to say the fishing stats are great for us. It looks like we're doing really well on average. I'm really pleased to see that.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Councillor Shell and Diu.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Dayu, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received for information September 27, 2023 IT status report.
All in favor? It's carried. Next is the use of orthoimagery and impact assessment information by county councillors. I think we anticipated what this answer might be. Go ahead.
Yes. So if you recall, back in July, I brought a report forward with some GIS activities and projects that we were undertaking. And during that discussion, there was a question about whether or not county councilors or even municipal councilors could get access to our municipal GIS website, which has all of our ortho imagery plus the ownership data. So I committed at that time to take those questions back because there was some concerns about privacy, licensing, and whatnot. And I committed to bring those questions and take those questions away and bring back a report. And this is that report. So first, I guess the first thing I'll talk about is the ortho imagery, since that's the less sticky of the two. I reached out to the MNRF, who we contract to get the ortho imagery. And they said, as long as the purpose of use is for county or municipal internal purposes, then it doesn't really matter if councillors have access to that. So the plan is still to put up the 2013 and 2018 ortho imagery to the public. And then when the 2024 imagery becomes available early next spring, then councillors will have access to that. Second question was about the MPAC assessment data, and that's where things got a little stickier. I talked to our MPAC account rep, and as well as I pulled down the FAQs about our license agreement. And basically the long and short of it is, because of the special categorization of councillors, where you're neither, you're not necessarily an employee, you're not the public. There's only very, very small use cases where a municipal councillor would be granted access to that data. Yeah, I don't know if I've got anything else to add. Like I said, I put in the content from the conversation with the MPAC account rep, plus the FAQ, and item number F speaks directly to the use by members of municipal council. So I hope that gives council all the information that they need.
I guess we have little choice but to accept the response that we've received. However, I would point out that in many cases, the municipal councillor, if, for instance, if they're on the land division or committee of adjustment, would be wanting to use the information solely for planning purposes. And that's the part that kind of sticks in my craw a little bit, that it can make your role a lot easier if you have access to that information.
And if I may, I did actually present that scenario because I know councillors sit on those committees, and that was not, at least according to the account rep and her understanding, and a permitted use.
Interesting. Any other questions or comments? I just thank you for looking into that for us. I know that that's something that we'd hoped for a different answer, but.
Yeah, and if I may, I know that the Eastern Ontario GIS group has been working with MPAC because they're redoing their agreement, and I think that we have to sign by the end of the year. And they were trying to push to open up the usage of that data more so than what it currently exists, and it doesn't look like much progress has been made. So it's unfortunate, but we're not alone in fact wanting to use this data for more than just the given purposes.
What's unfortunate is the amount of money that we pay Impact, and yet they are able to tell us what to do or not. Anyway, I shouldn't say that. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillors Carter and Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received for information the September 27th, 2023 report on the use of county ortho imagery and impact assessment data by county councilors.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I guess we have nothing under economic development and tourism today, so we'll move into emergency medical services. Good morning, Chief.
Morning, Warden, members of council. Before you have the report, just to have receive pre-approval for the purchase of a new ambulance. As we have done in the past, we replace an ambulance every 6 years, and every 6 years we replace two. We replaced the two the last time. I have one on order right now, but again, getting the ambulance in a timely fashion is still taking time. So the idea is to get our order in now. So hopefully we can receive this ambulance sometime in 2024. And as you'll see that we replaced them at 300,000 kilometers. The ambulance that will be replaced with this order is already over 300,000 kilometers. So it'll have another year of driving. It'll be the second vehicle up, but it'll still put on significant kilometers in the next year. Along with that, I've included with your approval to install a power load system. The power load system is becoming industry standard, and most services are going to it now. It eliminates the actual lift into the back of the ambulance. If it's installed at the factory, there's probably about a $4,000 to $5,000 savings rather than retrofitting an ambulance later on with it. So I've included that in the price. Also, prices of ambulances have significantly went up. When I started ordering ambulances, I was getting them for like 148,000. Last year's is going to be, the one coming this time is probably close to 200, and they've gone up 9% this year. So very significant increases in prices.
Questions or comments on the pre-approval request? Councillor Carter?
Not particular to this request, but you know, if we saw the situation that we have with our growth rate and the further situation with the hospitals and so on, I think I don't expect that lead times are going to go down at any time soon. That we probably should try to stay ahead of the curve. And, you know, particularly if, you know, I know the ambulance that you're replacing can always go into some sort of reserve that if you need it, but if they're going to be close to 400,000 kilometers on them, they're not going to be much left of them. So, you know, I think that we have to make sure that we can continue to have an adequate supply, and we should, you know, not right now, but probably next year, look at the possibility that we may need to get an extra unit.
That's something that we can talk about during the budgeting process, and as well, if we early next year, if we have a strategic planning process, include that in the discussion. Any other comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the pre-approval? Councillors Dayu and McKechnie.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives EMS-09-2023 report requesting pre-budget approval to purchase an ambulance with installed power load. That Haliburton County Council direct staff to proceed with the purchase of one ambulance with power load prior to the passage of the 2024 budget to allow the county to maintain priority status in the manufacturing process, and that staff be directed to present the necessary bylaw authorizing the warden and clerk to execute the contract.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move into other administrative reports. The first is approval to release a request for proposal for Potash Lake Bridge. I believe that would be your CEO giving us reports.
Thanks, Warden. The report in front of you is requesting a budget allocation or a pre-approval of about $130,000 to proceed with the design and ultimately the contract administration and inspection for the Potash Lake Bridge. It's a rehabilitation project. I think we have the proposed costs or preliminary estimate of $1,150,000 for the rehabilitation itself. But these works support that. Because of our procurement processes changing, this is a little different. In the past, we've simply budgeted the $40,000, authorized the work knowing that there would be further work assigned. But in this case, we are proposing to do an RFP for the full scope of work. And so $40,000 is included in the 2023 budget for this work. And then the 90 would be a pre-approval of next year's budget.
Questions or comments? Could I have a motion to approve the request? Councillors Shell and Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the September 27th, 2023 staff report, approval to release a request for proposal for the Potash Lake Bridge engineering consulting assignment, that Haliburton County Council provide approval for staff to release a request for proposal for the acquisition of an engineering consultant for the Potash Lake Bridge Rehabilitation Project.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is the September Rail Trail status report.
Thank you, Warden. I don't have a lot to add to the report. You can see that work is ongoing, and we're hoping to see the Rail Trail Roundtable start up again in the near future.
I know that there are probably some people that are anxious to see a decision made on the side-by-side request, but obviously, given circumstances, we need a little bit more time to check on other municipalities to see how things are going there. So we'll see that in October. Any questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the rail trail status report? Councilors Carter and Fury.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Fury, be it resolved that the Haliburton County Council receives for information the September 27th, 2023 Rail Trail Status Report.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a request for proposals on the land registry office.
Thank you, Warden. The staff began once we had full access to the property, and it was emptied, we began some investigation work into what would be required to update it. We had some consultation with the building department in Minden Hills. The building department has advised that we will need ultimately an architectural design, some certification in order to move forward with some plans. And so we are suggesting that we do an RFP for that work. And just for information purposes, we also at the same time had some conversations about the front steps here at the county administration building from an accessibility standpoint and other ways. They are a mess and we need to get on those. But again, we need some design in order to get a building permit for that. So we're probably going to it may be that we'll be bringing forward a report asking for some financial approvals around that as well. So, but for now, this just covers the registry office.
So, and I would assume that at some point, when it comes to the design of the new council chambers, that there will be some options come back to council for a review and consideration. Also that I noted when I was there that I don't think that the washrooms are actually accessible, which might cause a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, that's all part of the design.
So a mover and a seconder to move forward with this. Councilors Carter and McKechnie.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor McKechnie, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the September 27th, 2023 staff report, land registry office request for proposal status.
All in favor? That's carried. I wonder if we would defer the next item until after we have our closed session. If everyone would agree to that. So next up would be the community safety and well-being plan update.
Good morning, Warden Danielson and members of council.
Good morning.
It's great to see you all again. Before you is a report on the Haliburton County Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, including an update on what's been happening since my last report to council in the spring. I'm happy to share a few highlights of CSWB related work and efforts today. Mark, if you could help with the presentation. I'm not sure if you're able to see it yet.
Not yet.
Thanks so much, Mark. We can head to the next slide. So since it was approved by council in January 2022, the plan has been slightly redesigned and has been remediated for accessibility. It's available in full as a PDF on a community safety and well-being plan landing page on the county's website at this address seen here. Making the plan accessible online was a requirement of the provincial government's CSWB plan mandate. Next slide, please. CSWB plans, as you know, focus on social development, prevention, risk intervention, and incident response, marking a shift in focus from a reactive, responsive-based approach to a more proactive, holistic approach to community safety. Next slide. Of course, the ultimate goal of community safety and well-being planning is to achieve sustainable communities where everyone is safe, has a sense of belonging and opportunities to participate, and where individuals and families can meet their needs for education, healthcare, food, housing, income, and social and cultural expression. This goal is something that really sticks with us at the advisory table and in any plans that we work on. Next slide, please. And the next slide. So in this first year, Haliburton County's CSWB advisory table has been meeting regularly, approximately every 2 months or so. And the next slide. Membership at the table was expanded to include a representative of the Haliburton County Paramedic Service and a representative of the gender-based violence sector. Members also joined the table to represent education and healthcare sectors and the police department, replacing previous members on leave or in different roles. We also welcomed Councillor Jen Dayu to the table. The advisory table serves the legislative role of advisory committee for the plan, discusses challenges, opportunities, and emerging issues in our community, and provides stewardship for Haliburton County's CSWB plan, really acting as champions of CSWB within their work and across the broader community. Next slide, please. This is Haliburton County's plan on a page, a document created to help share key information about this complex plan in a more easily accessible format. This summary includes our 4 priority areas, as well as enablers, so the supports required to facilitate plan success, and risks, the factors that pose barriers to plan success. Also note that in my staff report under climate change considerations, I noted none, but climate change is a risk factor associated to several other key focus areas, including homelessness, poverty, and mental and physical health. So there is increased concern around the impacts of climate change, particularly the differentiated impacts on those already vulnerable in the county. The county climate change coordinator and I work closely on projects, initiatives, and planning as a result. Next slide, please. As you know, after public consultation with service providers, organizations, and the general public, as well as a deep dive into data available, our 4 priority areas are housing and homelessness, poverty and employment, mental health, substance use and addiction, and healthcare and system access. There are 12 goals and 25 strategies connected to these priorities. The plan is a living document, always with opportunity to adjust goals and strategies and to face emerging issues. For each priority, the advisory table is working to identify or establish working groups to support the goals and strategies of each of the priority areas, ideally aligning with existing groups whose work plans or a piece of their work plan aligns with our goals and strategies, avoiding duplication. The table continues to work toward identifying lead agencies in the housing and homelessness, poverty and employment, and healthcare and system access priorities. Next slide, please. Under our mental health, substance use, and addiction priority, we have aligned with the Connections Committee, people with lived experience, and service providers connecting around mental health and substance use. Haliburton County Voice is a gathering of people working on a better life for themselves. They meet to share with each other and in the future to help improve community services. Voice is operated by people with lived and living experience who are working on a mental health, mood, substance use, addiction, or similar issue. The next event in the Coming Full Circle Community Education Series, which is designed by the Connections Committee and Voice, is being held on October 18th in Minden. The series is for service providers or community members who want to get involved in fostering a compassionate and evidence-based approach to substance use and mental health in Haliburton County. Next slide, please. In July, we received a notice from the Ministry of the Solicitor General approving our proposal for an OPP detachment board. Our Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Steering Committee made this recommendation, which is adopted by each of the local councils back in 2022. As noted in the letter sent, the regulations to operationalize this decision will be forthcoming. Next slide, please. I apologize for using a winter photo there. I know none of us are there yet. And the next slide. Continuing on with highlights, I know that some of you attended these events or have seen updates about them, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of the great things happening throughout the community and the stories connected to them. So continuing on with highlights, working together with the Community Emergency Management Coordinator members, a First Responders Day was held on May 1st at participating EMS bases, fire stations, and the OPP station. Open houses took place from 4 to 6 p.m. at each fire station in Highlands East, as well as Haliburton, Stanhope, and Minden, EMS bases in Torrey Hill, Haliburton, and Minden, and the OPP station in Minden. The OPP station in Minden was attended by Haliburton Highlands OPP and also Kawartha Haliburton Victim Services, OPP Recruitment, Canadian Mental Health Association, the K9 Unit, and Special Forces. OPP officers also joined with paramedics at the EMS base in Haliburton. Next slide, please. Visitors to the open houses ranged in age from 2 weeks old to senior residents. They did not declare their age, but I believe they were seniors. Attendees were especially interested in emergency response vehicles, burn permit information, 72-hour emergency kits, a command post with drones on display, the K9 partners, programs and services offered, and interactive exhibits.
I think
Next
the
slide.
one on the left did actually sign up with the OPP, but it'll be a few years before they're eligible for service.
I don't know. I think there was a conversation about a fire chief one day, future fire chief situation there. Next slide, please. The CEMC group noted that there was value to the event, being able to offer the public knowledge on what to do in case of an emergency, as well as provide information about preventative programs available. They noted it was great to see the entire county working together, having the same goal to support the public with information and awareness. This event increased awareness and access to service and showed a great collaboration between our first responder teams. If you're looking for more photos and a video of the day throughout the county, please visit the CSWB website events section. And of course, a tremendous thank you to those participants who braved the very rainy day and to everyone involved in organizing and planning for the day and for the work they do every day for our community. Next slide, please. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Youth Art Call for Entries launched on April 20th. We modeled this event after a similar event held in neighboring municipalities, including one hosted through the Kawartha Art Gallery and City of Kawartha Lakes. Next slide. So I was invited to present on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan to 2 grade 9-10 classes at HHSS at the high school, as well as a grade 7 class at JDHES. Students discussed challenges and solutions they saw within the community, both during the presentation as well as in later classes, some as a part of a unit on art as activism. While we had planned an online exhibition, of course, as is the Haliburton County way, there was an interest in doing even more. And the HHSS and JDHES educators and students really pulled forward or together to put forward this in-person exhibition at the HHSS open house event on May 10. Next slide, please. So 45 students shared their work with their parents, friends, staff, and the broader community at that event. Teachers noted that some students found the work particularly motivating, noting that one student's work was the first art assignment he had felt compelled to complete that year. Next slide, please. A youth engagement survey launched on the county's Wade In site on April 20th as well, and is open to those aged 12 to 24, regardless of whether or not they participated in the art exhibition. To date, more than 30 responses have been received to the survey, which asks open-ended questions about local youth's thoughts on our priority areas, as well as transportation. Our plan didn't have a strong youth voice, so the advisory table is taking these comments, concerns, and experiences from youth responders into consideration going forward, and will continue to engage. Next slide, please. Safe and Well, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Youth Art online exhibition included 16 pieces from local youth. If you haven't had the chance yet, please take a look and share. The pieces are remarkable and the artist statements are honest and authentic about the youth experience in Haliburton County. And next slide, please. Shout out to partners, including TLDSB and the HHSS and JDHES educators and students, especially Maya Jones, Colleen Petrick, and Kayla Switzer, who helped to mentor their classmates and younger peers and curated the in-person event. To Limbic Collective for their guidance in planning the event, and to Rails End Gallery curator Lori Jones, who gave us access to her uploading system, offered guidance, created this online exhibition, and really championed both the idea and the student artists. To view the exhibition, please visit the Rails End Gallery website where an interactive gallery is being hosted. Next slide, please. In June, we launched a community directory survey on the county's Wade-In site. This survey was open to all, and we sent invites to representatives of local organizations and agencies to respond. Information gathered through this survey will be used in the development of an online program and strategy catalog, data dashboard, and community amenities and services directory. One piece of that survey that has been particularly interesting is noting what data people are looking for that they haven't accessed or haven't been able to access. I'll bring those needs forward to the CKL Haliburton County Data Consortium next month for review. Next slide, please. This slide shares an example of what both an electronic PDF and printed version of a community services directory could look like. This is the Up Your Life Guide from York Region, and I appreciate Councillor Charlene Biggerstaff from the town of Georgina walking me through what their process looked like to create this resource. Next slide, please. And this slide shows an outline of what a CSWB one-stop hub online could look like. We are finding it has been a struggle for some residents to know who to call for services and supports in this area and how to find and access that information. So this hub would bring together CSWB information, a community directory, and localized information in one place on a County of Haliburton site for not only residents who live here, but for people out of town looking to help and support their loved ones in this area. It's important that this information is easily available before people are in crisis. Many thanks to the county's climate change coordinator, IT team, and GIS technologists to determine what options might be available to help us build this site. Next slide, please. I'm very excited to share an update about a community mobile outreach initiative pilot project, a collaboration with City of Kawartha Lakes staff. This project first launched in City of Kawartha Lakes and was extremely successful in bringing services to people where they are at. But from what I've seen, it has also really nurtured community building for both residents and service providers in attendance. It's a strong example of central benefits the province identified in CSWB planning. So better collaboration of services, enhancing collaboration among sectors, transforming service delivery, ensuring individuals with complex needs receive appropriate services, and increasing awareness and access to services. Within a few weeks of having started in this role, I received a call from a community member who volunteers in housing looking for just this type of support for residents. And he was able to attend one of the sessions to see it in action recently. The program started in the late spring and sees community partners visiting one site each week for 2 hours, rotating right now between locations in Minden and Haliburton. That might expand with time. The initiative brings services, support, and information to residents, including vulnerable people who are couch surfing or experiencing homelessness and facing concurrent health and well-being challenges. Partners involved include representatives of Haliburton Highlands Health Services, Mental Health, John Howard Society, the Haliburton County Community Paramedicine Team, and an outreach client services worker. So really people are able to show up when they can, when they're able to, and there's always a few workers on site to help. I should note that being able to build a relationship with that outreach client services worker has been helpful outside of these sessions as well, as she has been able to connect with some of our municipal staff to support unhoused people found living in public spaces. And being able to call her has meant fewer calls to the OPP. Next slide, please. In 2019, the concept of augmentative and alternative communication boards was brought forward to the county's Joint Accessibility Committee as well as through Dysart's Head Lake Park Master Plan community consultation sessions. Full disclosure, it was me that brought this forward prior to joining the county in my other important role of mom. The boards are intended to promote inclusion and raise awareness and education of complex communication needs, as well as augmentative and alternative communication, which is communication that combines gestures, eye pointing, vocalizations, and pointing to symbols as communication for people with limited speech abilities. People who use AAC might include those with cerebral palsy, autism, Parkinson's disease, dementia, ALS, stroke, and traumatic brain injury. Next slide, please. These boards are gaining in popularity, so you might have seen one. At a county level, the committee supported communication boards being considered in public playgrounds at first, with consideration to add boards to libraries and long-term care or hospital locations in the future. Funding has been reserved for this project. In Dysart, a board being placed at Rotary Park in Haliburton was approved for grant funding to be used by 2024. The project in its entirety was put on hold during the early stages of the pandemic. Next slide, please. Dysart staff would like to see a communication board put in place this year and have resumed discussions around planning, including both me and Joe MacArthur from MacArt Studio, who designed these outdoor games and fun stations you've seen in Head Lake Park, to discuss what the boards could look like. Guidance has been sought through the Joint Accessibility Committee, AAC user groups locally and through the province, speech therapists and occupational therapists at 5 Counties Children's Center, and local kids about feedback on the look, feel, and placement of the boards. Next slide, please. And here's a first look at what a communication station could look like in Haliburton County. This is a MacArt Studio first draft. The board is designed to be fun and accessible to use for kids, adults, seniors, newcomers, or for those whose English isn't their first language, and show that our community is welcoming to inclusion. Just as an example of raising awareness, one person working on this project for quite some time, one day earlier this year, had a light bulb moment. So they realized that while they had been thinking of this type of communication support for people born non-speaking, they might be able to use it with a family member who had lost their ability to speak as an elder, but still had much desire to communicate. And that's really the hope. Next slide, please. In the future, laminated AAC pages can also be shared with first responders and emergency department responders, and the possibility of adding local AAC pages to restaurant menus, etc., has also been considered. Next slide, please. Last week, we partnered with Service Canada to bring the Service Canada outreach team to Minden, co-organizing a Service Canada center-style desk in the county building. Service Canada staff was on hand to help residents with employment insurance, Canada Pension Plan, old age security, guaranteed income supplement, social insurance numbers, and passport application intake. The outreach is part of a pilot project, with Service Canada's goal being to get out into the communities where there are possible barriers for clients to be able to get to a Service Canada location for service. From a CSWB perspective, we are grateful to be able to offer better access to services and fill some of those gaps. At last week's event, 6 scheduled appointments and 2 walk-in appointments supported services for 13 people, ranging in age from just a few years old to 81 years old. There were 15 people on the wait list. However, in an update since filing this staff report, I can confirm that based on the success of this program and a really great partnership, Service Canada will be bringing the outreach team back to Minden for future dates this fall, 2 this October and 2 in November. With that announcement, I actually left my phone out of the room because I'm sure people have started calling already. Additionally, the outreach team is visiting Highlands East in the upcoming months as well. Next slide, please. This slide shares some of the connections and meaningful relationships I've had the opportunity to form over the past few months. Next slide, please. And this slide shares some of the training I've had the opportunity to learn from over the past few months. A note in particular in recognition of this Truth and Reconciliation Month about the University of Alberta's Indigenous Canada course. The course is free or available for a small donation to support the work and includes 12 online modules exploring both the different histories and contemporary perspectives of Indigenous people living in Canada. I've been finding it really helpful. Next slide, please. So there's a lot going on, and this really shares some of the highlights of CSWB related projects, but I'm always available to you or other community members if you need to check in or find some support in helping others. I'm also very willing to help invite subject matter experts to this table to share a current look at what folks are struggling with in our community, from mental health to drug poisonings to poverty to homelessness. Next slide, please. This is sharing some of the next steps where you might find me over the next few months working on some of these projects. Tomorrow, I'm presenting on Haliburton County's CSWB plan at a social prescribing day organized by the Ontario Health Team. And the next slide, please. So I joke about the CSWB department because the department is me, but the work you've heard about today and that has happened or is ongoing is truly the result of collaboration of so many in the community working and volunteering and contributing in the way they can, any way they can, to give friends and neighbors a helping hand. So it's really a group effort. Next slide, please. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on our CSWB plan and CSWB related work throughout the county. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks so much, Sue. The excellent report, and it really brings us up to date on some of the excellent work that you've been doing. I wonder, do members of council have any questions or comments that they'd like to make? Councillor Fury?
I assume this is a provincially mandated committee. Well, sitting back as a layman, the first time I've seen this is a scattergun approach. What I'd like to know is what the mandate is and how you measure the success. Like there's so many things that we're involved with here. It's unbelievable, like a little bit of everything. I think if you don't focus on one or two things, you don't get anything done. That's my view.
And I think one of the reasons that the province mandated these across the province actually was that there are so many groups doing really good work all over the place in a scattergun approach, but there hasn't been a coordination of that work. And in our case, it was really evident through the planning process that people weren't aware that help was there. And so a big part of Sue's job is to, first of all, find out what is out there for help and then connecting people to it. And so even last week, as an example, Sue received a call from one staff person who at a local municipality who was aware of a couple people that were experiencing homelessness, but had no idea where to call, how to connect them to help and support that they needed. So she was able to do that, put them in touch with a housing outreach officer. And so we were able to find them the help they needed at that time. So I think it has been a bit of a learning experience as we went through, which we kind of knew it would be, and there will be more focus over time. But I think for us, what's been really striking to me is that we didn't know a lot of these groups were out there doing really good work to help people. And if we didn't know, certainly I don't think very many in the community knew. So it's connecting them to those kinds of supports and help. And Sue really has, in a very short period of time, become a go-to. I know she gets calls regularly from people saying, you know, I'm having this challenge with my parent, or I'm having this challenge with, and where do I go? Where do I call? And so she's able to provide that support now.
Councillor Shell?
Thanks for that, Sue. Lots of great work going on. I say many, it seems like many, I'm not even sure, I know it was before the pandemic. The Minden Food Bank, when it was still the Minden Food Bank at the time, created a directory that I know Minden Hills supported in the printing process that included all of the resources, or as many as we were aware of at the time, information, phone numbers, as well as I believe it was for the city of Kawartha Lake. So that might be a good starting point for you to gather some information that's already in place.
Yeah, through you, Warden Danielson, thank you so much for that, Councillor Shell. Absolutely, that's a guide that has been used. So I think they printed it in 2016, 2018, and then they reprinted it this year. And so I'm seeing it get a lot of use at the community mobile outreach sessions that we're at. People are picking it up. And in some cases, you know, residents are picking it up to use for themselves or to share with their neighbor. And also I'm seeing first responders pick it up to make sure that they have access to it and can share it on with people. There's also a sort of, actually I have one here. There's a smaller card that's sort of business sized card This is Haliburton Highlands resource card that folds out. And so there's numbers here for people to access supports and services, a little easier for first responders to have on their person to be able to hand out to people. And then there's another directory as well that's available online. So there are a few. And so what we're just trying to do is streamline that, see if we can get it all together, work together, absolutely, and not duplicate efforts, and then make sure that it's vetted by all of the organizations and the agencies in the county to make sure we have the correct numbers and to make sure that it's most accessible for people looking for help. Sometimes it can be tricky to know. I know these services and what they do and what they offer now, but I haven't always. So if you're experiencing a particular situation or crisis in your family or amongst your neighborhood, it can be difficult to know who to call. So really trying to organize that in the most accessible way. And that's the work that has been done in York Region. They worked with a group of people with lived experience to help put that directory together to make sure that it was something that people could go to really quickly and that everyone could access. But absolutely, I don't think we should duplicate efforts, and I'm really happy to work with everyone. Thanks for that.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I think that the good report, first of all, but when the goal that has been sort of tossed over to us by the provincial government is to improve the community and the community safety and well-being. And so, like you said, there's an awful lot there. And, you have to keep reminding yourself what the goal is. And then the idea of all of these groups that are doing, terrific work, even within our relatively small community, you can't have 87 people on the on the committee. And so it's trying to find out who are the people that are the most representative and so on. And I think this is not something that you sort of start up and create the committee and the group and you're done. It's a much bigger task than that, and I think it's going to evolve and change over the years. And so I've only been involved now for less than a year, and I think that there's been with Sue, there's been terrific progress made, and I think that each successive report that comes will show it a little bit more focused and a little bit more concrete, but there are a lot of moving parts to the community safety and well-being. So
I know, as you say, there are so many different parts to it, but I find that each of the projects that Sue has coordinated and have, that we've seen, have brought a voice, a different voice each time. I know one of the things that I was particularly interested in or kind of wondered about at first was the youth art project, but what their artworks said to us and how they were able to voice some of their fears and concerns, I found really touching. I would urge anybody who has not looked at the virtual gallery to check that out. It's pretty touching. Councillor Dayu.
Thanks, Sue. Now that the gears have been turning for a number of months now, what are your thoughts when you put your sights towards the north? To Dorset, further north up to Oxtongue Lake, where there's a lot of hidden poverty, a lot of hidden vulnerability, and a number of the service providers, in fact, probably all the service providers are based in Huntsville, Lake Bays. So what does that look like to make sure that those folks are included in our plan, but if their services are in fact outside of our jurisdiction? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so much of the work that I'm doing is really about connecting with the different organizations and agencies, and many of our organizations and agencies are CKL Haliburton County or Haliburton County CKL. So we're really looking at making sure that Haliburton County, all those tiny little areas and all of the residents that we know are sort of potentially hidden, that everybody has access to the supports they need. So one of the things that I'd like to do with the community services directory guide, if possible, is to make sure that a printed version of it goes to each home or is available throughout the county to each location, so that people know that, you know, just because it says CKL or just because it says Huntsville doesn't mean that they can't serve our community members here too. The outreach worker who has been working with some of our friends and neighbors who are unhoused in the community is making sure to access all areas of the community. And so while the community mobile outreach right now is focused on sort of some concentrated areas in Minden and Haliburton, it will ideally expand in the future. And if not, there is still support from her and her team. And so if anybody knows of anybody in those areas that requires support and isn't getting it, please feel free to connect with me at any time, and I'm happy to send you in the right direction. But in terms of making sure that all of the areas of the county are sort of covered, I think with time, we'll continue to work on that and make sure that everybody has access to the services they need. Those services are there. It's just about knowing how to access them. Does that answer your question?
One of the things that too is Sue, I think it was the second or third slide, showed sort of a circle, almost looked like a target. And she talked about becoming more proactive, and the most expensive, so often challenges become calls for police, calls for fire, calls for ambulance, which lead to emergency room calls, that kind of thing, emergency department visits. Those are the most expensive responses. If we can get those earlier on, if it really is an investment, if we can get people help early on at the proactive stages, before it becomes an addiction, before they become homeless, before then it really is a cost saving for the community. And you know, it's all about getting people help, but it really is, there's a financial benefit to that. We've experienced it with our community paramedic program. If we're going there, every emergency room visit brought in by an ambulance, a 911 ambulance, is an incredibly expensive proposition. If we can deal with them in their home and deal with it before it becomes an emergency, there's a benefit to the community in that, from a financial standpoint, as well as you know, an overall health of the community. So I know it's an investment, but I think what we will see over time is that a healthier community where there is more well-being will be actually more cost effective as well.
Are there questions or comments? Well, thank you so much, Sue. Your work is much appreciated, and we look forward to its evolution. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the update? Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the September 27th, 2023 staff report on community safety and well-being plan update.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you so much, everyone.
I think we might have a 10-minute break.
Mark, are you there?
Welcome back. Next on the agenda are the reports and minutes from external boards and agencies, and we will start with the Haliburton Board, the Pine Ridge Health Unit. Councillor Rail, anything to report?
Yeah, there's a few things for the public. Infectious disease update. They're anticipating pretty heavily the upticks in both COVID, influenza, and RSV this fall. And they're strongly recommending that people over 65, especially those with immune deficiencies, get it done. The COVID-19 vaccine will be upgraded to include as many of the variants as they can, and it should be available in Haliburton County towards the end of October or possibly in November. And the other two issues are the prime responsibility standard, which is what the health units live to, and this is what their mandate is. It is going to be revised in 2024. And why is that important? Because it's going to impact the budget of the 2024 for the HKPR health unit. And so they're in the process of trying to get their budget together, but it could end up with remedial fixes depending on what comes out of the prime responsibility standard. So that's that.
Any questions for Councillor Rail? Next is point in time. Councillor Dayu, any update?
Indeed. So point in time continues to go from strength to strength. They have just completed their strategic planning process, and I'm sure there will be some more information circulated on that and a document that you'll all be able to see. But it was discussed just last night at the board meeting, looking very, very good, focusing on re-engaging the community, expanding the care continuum, and investing in organizational health. And of note, I would say that just now, are they able to re-engage all of the in-person services that had to be halted or adapted during the pandemic? It has taken this amount of time to figure out a way of bringing the old mechanisms back and now expanding into new or engaged mechanisms, still keeping, video conferencing, telephone conferencing available for those clients who want it, but it has been now this long to get back to the fold and offer the same mechanisms of service that they were before. So they're very, very happy that they're finally reaching that point.
Any questions for Councillor Dayu? Next is the Wardens Caucus, and we have not met since our last meeting. We'll be meeting the second week in October, so I'll give you an update then. Anything on joint social and housing services, Councillor Carter?
No, the next meeting is October 18th, I believe.
And as well on the library board, Councillor Shell.
Thank you. We have the minutes there, but also a couple of things that I spoke to Chris about that he would like me to speak to would be there's an Indian dancing workshop at the library. Our amazing volunteer Yasmin will come twice in October to host dance workshops for all ages. Families are welcome. I'm going to assume that that's for Dysart. It's in at Minden Branch. It's all about the soil is the last of a series of Master Gardener sessions, and it's on October 28th. And the Friends of the Library are hosting their annual gala fundraiser for the first time since 2019 on Sunday, October 22nd at the Minden Hills Library, with Maureen Jennings of Murdoch Mysteries fame speaking to the audience about her writing career. So that's some exciting events coming up.
Thank you. Any questions on the library board? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the reports and minutes? Councillor McKechnie, Councillor Carter.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Carter. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the following: the June 15th, 2023 approved minutes from the HKPR Board of Health meeting, the HKPR Board of Health September 2023 summary report, the June 14 approved minutes, and the September 13th, 2023 draft minutes from the Haliburton County Public Library Board.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is the Land Division Committee work. Morning, Mr. Stone.
Morning, Warden, rest of council. So all the applications were approved by the committee this past meeting. The cupboard is full again, and we'll have a very busy October session as well. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Stone? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the activity report for September? Councillors Carter and you.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the planning report PLN 54 2023 entitled Land Division Activity Report for September 2023 as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next are other external boards and agencies, starting with the CPAC update. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Warden. Our meeting was on the 30th of August, and it pretty well focused, I would dare say, on mostly recruiting and staffing. And some of the information that we gathered, I was actually pretty pleased with it. We have gained 6 officers, and apparently the majority of these want to make Haliburton their home, which is exciting news. 4 of them are recruits, and apparently they're working out very well. We got approved and received funding for a 5th sergeant, and we now have the 5th sergeant in place. So another good news story. I don't know whether you that weren't at the meeting got this package or not, and
I have it for you.
it has all your stats and everything, your incidents all in there as well. We have been invited to take part in the and we have applied for 2 more constables as well. One is they're going to, I believe they're going to try to focus on court and the court system. So it will save our guys leaving here to go to court in Lindsay or wherever it might be. We have been invited to sit in, I think it's the 10th of October, to the detachment commander interviews. And I hope. Well, I don't know.
The 4th is here, I think.
Okay, but anyway, I thought I had the 10th.
It is the 10th.
Okay. And I hope all the mayors can attend that. It's a first, and I'm excited about that. That is my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Burton? Next is the EORN update. We did have a meeting yesterday, which I attended via Zoom. As I'm sure you're all aware that the focus for EORN right now is the Cell Gap project, as well as the 7 and 7 project, which both of them are pretty all consuming. I would say that there is a little bit of a delay in the Cell Gap work in the towers. There's an awful lot of people who just don't want to look at a tower. And that seems to be the primary concern. And I think that it has in some ways delayed things to some extent, but there's always the duty to consult as well with all the Indigenous groups, and that's taking a considerable amount of time. So EORN and/or Rogers have applied to both upper levels of government for an extension on their project. And it sounds like there's not going to be an issue getting that extension. Another thing that we're just like herding cats, trying to get all the members together to do a strat plan. We just haven't been able to agree on dates. Everybody's got busy schedules. So I'm hoping that we can do it in December, but it may be as late as January before we can do the strat plan. Otherwise, things are rolling along quite well. That's just it for me. Anything on poverty reduction roundtable? Councillor Fury.
Well, they're looking for a table big enough to clubhouse to participate. That's not funny.
So has the group met? Okay. So we would now move into closed session. So could I have a mover and a seconder then to move into closed? Councillors Carter and McKechnie.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council enter into closed session for the following reasons: labor relations or employee negotiations, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board.
All in favor? That's carried. Yes. Yep. So coming out of closed, one item coming out of closed, just as information, Councillor Dayu did declare a conflict of interest with respect to discussion on short-term rentals. We also have a deferred item. If I could have a mover and a seconder to accept or enter into the service provider agreement with the Haliburton Lakes, Fourth Lakes Haliburton Ontario Health Team. Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Fury.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Fury. Whereas the County of Haliburton has agreed to become a member of the Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Ontario Health Team. And whereas the Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Ontario Health Team has developed new agreements and updated prior agreements for the KLH OHT. And whereas the new and updated agreements have been presented to the Council for the County of Haliburton and are attached, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council approves the County of Haliburton entering into the new KLH OHT agreements as presented to Council and attached, the OHT collaboration agreement and the OHT operational support provider agreement, that Haliburton County Council approves entering into the following and amended and restated KLH and OHT agreements as presented to Council and attached, the amended and restated data sharing agreement, the amended and restated fund holder and indemnity agreement, and that staff be directed to present a bylaw authorizing the warden and clerk to execute the above mentioned agreements on behalf of the corporation.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Then we move into our bylaws. The first is the bylaw to authorize an agreement to acquire an ambulance. We have a mover and a seconder for that. Councillors McKechnie and Shell.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Shell. Be it resolved that bylaw 4204 being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with Crestline Coach Limited for the supply of one ambulance to be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. The next is to authorize the execution of various agreements related to the newly formed Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Ontario Health Team. We have a mover and a seconder for that. Councillors Carter and Rael.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that bylaw 4205 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of various agreements related to the newly formed Kawartha Lakes Haliburton Ontario Health Team be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a bylaw to appoint members of council, public representatives and county staff to the Community Climate Action Plan Advisory Group. I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that bylaw 4206 being a bylaw to appoint members of council, public representatives and county staff to the Community Climate Action Plan Advisory Group be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, under notice of motions, we do have a notice of motion with respect to a suggestion for public transportation. So I would turn that over to Councillor Carter to bring forward.
Yes, and looking at the history, I couldn't find a previous notice of motion, and since it's on the agenda all the time, I thought it would be a worthwhile endeavor to come up with something. Now, look, we have been looking at transportation for obviously a number of years prior to me getting on this council. It's been noted how, you know, how it affects the community that we don't have anything. I have not necessarily been wildly in favor of some of the proposals because all too often people try to make it everything, you know, try to put everything in there that you have, custom call up and dial up and picks you up at your home and so on and so forth. And it becomes very difficult to try to determine what the cost of something like that would be. So the motion is to start if you will, a shuttle route that would run between Minden and Haliburton for 6 days a week. And it would service many of the buildings that are part of the long-term care, KLHHC buildings, Stanworth, Extendicare, and so on. Places where there are many people that don't have cars, either because of age or finances and so on, and would link those people to some of the key commercial resources in the two centers and to healthcare. I'll say that we have a significant problem here in Minden with people not having the access to healthcare that they once did. So this is, I think that this is something that we need to do. I think it also acts as a starting point. This one spine, if you will, that runs between Haliburton and Minden could then have offshoot of routes that go to Wilberforce, routes that go to West Guilford and so on. But we have the one core in the middle. This would serve probably, even this one bit would serve about 50% of the population in Haliburton County. So I see it as a starting point, and I see it as something that is a benefit to the whole group, the whole county. And we have been putting money aside for this. So I think I'm proposing that we have a 2-year trial that and see how it goes. Much to be decided. I don't want to decide where all the bus stops are or anything like that. I think that's best served by some committee that we would find, and we would have to determine what the fare would be. But right now the cost for the taxi was what, $60 or something between the two centers, and there's a lot of people who can't afford that $120 round trip to move between the centers. And we have people in Haliburton who have to come to Minden for healthcare, or dentists, and vice versa. So I think this is a good start, and it shows good faith for what the population is asking us to do.
I thank you. I do agree that it's a good starting point, and commend you for bringing the suggestion forward. However, I would argue that it does not serve the entire county, and there are 4 municipalities paying into the transportation reserve, 2 of which would not be served by this in any way, shape, or form. So that would be my concern. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't move forward with it, because we do need to start somewhere. But I would look to other members of council for comments. Councillor Shell.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I agree it is a good starting point, and with there not being an option for people to go to the hospital in Minden now, if they do, it may even slow down on some of the ambulance calls. If somebody needs to get to a hospital and they absolutely don't have a way, it could be, they may phone an ambulance for something that maybe doesn't require an ambulance. I think it's a good starting point, and I think we need to investigate it. And other things too, like even just like I said, for shopping, and because I understand there's a total of 4 municipalities, but the larger, like the grocery stores, etc., would be within those 2 larger communities. So
Wilberforce has a food land. Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, very much appreciate the idea. Also very much appreciate the concerns about about servicing and financing because the other areas don't have public transport to medical services either, you know, so it is based on the removal of a service from somewhere rather than the creation of a service for all. So, but I'd be very curious to see the results of an RFP because that's really all we're looking at this stage. I think it's a fine idea to see that and have the fulsome conversation at that time. For sure, I'm for.
Councillor Fury.
I think it's a really good starting point. I just like to see, I'm a devil for details here, but I'd like to see the logistics, like who has the answering service? How is, what's the liability insurance? 'Cause I think we need to see a little more detail. And I don't know whether you're in a position to put that forward, Councillor.
Go ahead, Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I think just a couple things. I would look at this as being strictly a shuttle that is going back and forth.
And
So
it's
there's
got a
no,
timeline then.
yeah, on a timeline. So there's no calling up to schedule it for yourself. It's not personal. There's no extras here. You know, it's not necessarily going to be accessible. Vehicles. It's not going to carry bikes and watercraft or, you know, the whole thing. It's pretty much a straightforward service. And the point is that, you know, Route 1, if you will, has to start before we can get to the various other areas of the county. So I'm not suggesting that we preclude and we're not going to, you know, have something going to other areas of the county. I'm just saying that we need to get this, if you will, this main spine done, and then we can move out from there. You know, so that's it really is just the starting point. And the thing is that, you know, we have all sorts of these places that if you had AMO, there's all these municipalities who are starting something. So I want to make it sure that it really is like a bus service, and it's
Dedicated, right?
there's nothing about it that is going to be custom in any way. It's going to follow the same route.
And there would be a fee structure associated with the service.
Yeah.
Councillor Perry, then Councillor Dayu.
Another question, would this be a public vehicle? And would it be-
Microphone, please, Mary.
Will this be a public vehicle and will it be wheelchair accessible?
Well, as I said, we have to go to an RFP to see what's out there.
Okay.
You know, if it, I wasn't envisioning it to be wheelchair accessible necessarily at the beginning, but perhaps, you know, the vehicles that people are using for these are. So I don't really know. But and whether or not it's vehicles that are owned by, you know, publicly or owned through, you know, that we buy the service from somebody, you know, I don't know. I think that is what we get out of an RFP.
One of the things before I get to Councillor Dayu, that I know that there are a number of things that would have to be ironed out aside from you know, an RFP or an agreement for transportation, is that I know that both Dysart and Highlands East have invested in various forms of transportation for their own people, and that is not shared by the rest of the community, but should be taken into, I'm assuming that it would be taken into consideration by both of you. And the other thing is, and I'm whipping off my warden's hat and putting on my Algonquin Highlands hat. Algonquin Highlands has been contributing to a number of things that are of benefit to the rest of the county. And that is in things like housing and EMS bases. We have continued to contribute to those things and have received nothing in return. I mean, there are tag-ons to those services, but we contribute equally to those services. And at some point in time, Algonquin Highlands is going to have to be considered in the bigger picture of things when it comes to contributions. That's all I'm saying about that. Councillor Dayu.
Well, you already mentioned it a moment or so ago, but I think fee structure is key, and I'd be curious to see what a cost recovery strategy might look like. Obviously not a full cost recovery, but there might be various types of fee structures that would support a little bit more cost recovery, rather than going on the assumption that it's a $2 ride one way and a $2 ride the other way. There could be in-betweens.
I think that there's a number of options that might come out of an RFP that we would, need to probably look at and discuss, how best to go when it comes to that. Sorry, cease. Councillor Rail, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of in favor of the RFQ because it'll give us an idea of where we're going and what we're doing. And I'm not saying it'll pick up where the task force left off, who knows how many years ago. There may actually be a totally new revamp at it. So I don't have a problem with that, especially if you're going to come up with something like a 1, 2, or a 5-year plan. What I do have a concern about, and I would be certainly reluctant to accept it, is that if and when this were to happen, it would be a unit that in the short term would be exclusively used between Haliburton and Minden. And I would not be too interested in having the portion of county taxpayers that live in Highland Seas contributing to the ongoing operation of something for which we do not have any benefit. So if we were to look at how to develop the program and expand it, that's one thing. But the operating costs on a day-to-day basis, we'd have to look at that in a completely different fashion. We're already doing it with the shoreline preservation bylaw, so I'm sure we can come up with something for this.
Councillor Shell.
I just want to clarify that in my mind, this was just a starting point and that it would eventually, if possible, grow into being a county-wide service, not just Minden and Dysart. But I think right now that's probably the two larger centers where you could maybe have an idea of how it may look or how popular it may be and what the cost would be. But absolutely agree with what you're saying.
Oh, I don't think anybody's saying that we don't want to look at it.
Yeah, no, but I just
they're
didn't want
considered.
anybody to think that, I mean, otherwise we could have just done this between Minden and Dysart, right? If it was going to be that way, but I see this as a countywide thing that, I mean, we've looked at it for years, so maybe this is just a good starting point.
Do you have a resolution prepared with respect to this?
Actually, Councillor Carter had a resolution prepared. So it moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Shell. Whereas the County of Haliburton supports the notion of public transportation, and whereas the population demographics of Haliburton County continue to trend older, and whereas the lack of public transportation is repeatedly identified as a hindrance to the growth of the community, and whereas reserve funds for transportation services are available per the 2023 budget, and whereas the closure of the Minden Emergency Department has increased the distances our constituents must travel to access medical care, be it resolved that Haliburton County issue an RFP for a 2-year bus transportation shuttle trial between Minden and Haliburton.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then?
You already do.
Oh,
Councillor
sorry.
Carter and Shell. Sorry.
Councillors Carter and Shell. All in favor? That's carried. And finally, could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillors Carter and Fury.
Moved by Councillor Carter, seconded by Councillor Fury, be it resolved that bylaw 4207 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the September 27th, 2023 meeting of Haliburton County Council be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Burton. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Burton, be it resolved that the September 27th, 2023 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor?